Stephen Munford. Local businessman and also sit on the City of Las Vegas Planning Commission. And I'm also a tribal member of the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribes in Montana as well. My mom's Native American, so we went back to Montana, and I grew up on the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana. I actually first arrived in Las Vegas in about 1968 with my father when he first came to Vegas. Lived here from then until about 1973, and then I came back down after I left college and just wanted to catch up and spending time with my father, but also, I knew there was probably some good opportunities here in Las Vegas. And I want to say it was about 1988, and that's when I worked at Caesars. My first job was a lifeguard while I was in college in the summertime to make money. I fought forest fires. First for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and I was a supervisor here in Las Vegas with the Bureau of Land Management. I got into gaming about 1991, 92, somewhere around there. Was in gaming as a table games dealer for, probably 15 years, and been out of gaming for 15 years. My wife, Kim Anderson Munford, she was a dancer in the Ziegfeld and Roy show, and danced in many of the show productions here in Las Vegas, and also out in New York City and cruise ships. We opened up a business together, a small business, beauty salon, and we owned that for 10 years. That was probably my first introduction to business. And also how I got into real estate. We got an SBA loan from one of the legends in SBA loan writing, from Ernest Fountain. He was African American, and he helped a lot of people get SBA loans back then. And he got our first SBA loan, but what I didn't like about the loan was our house that we lived in was collateralized. So I was worried that if that business failed, I'd lose my house. So I went to a real estate investment seminar in San Diego, and that's kind of was my first introduction into real estate. When I came back, my wife and I found a property. Real estate was prior to 2008, but the bubble that was being created in real estate was starting to kind of catch momentum. We had bought our first property. When we flipped our home, I made enough money. My first flip, I made about $130,000. And so I paid off my SBA loan, and I had working capital for my small business. And even to this day, I tell small business owners, don't just rely on your business, but you should have real estate. If you look at some of the more successful business people, very wealthy business people, they own real estate, because real estate gives them access to capital for their businesses. And that's one of the first lessons I learned in business. And then right now I'm working on consulting, since I was in government contracting, helping a tribal-owned 8A company. And for some people that don't know what the 8A program is about, 8A is under the Small Business Administration on the federal level. A lot of African American owned businesses have no idea about this. Right in our backyard, we have Creech Air Force Base, Department of Energy, and Nellis Air Force Base. Combined, in 1 year, they probably spend close to $4 billion in just buying stuff. Now with Trump in office, some of that small business and 8A programming is not as lucrative as it was. But, that, like I said, part of my mission is to try to let people know, especially our people know, about the opportunities like that are right in their backyard. Prior to the Trump administration, 30% of those procurements, they have to source disadvantaged businesses under Small Business Administration. When you look at the Small Business Administration and you go on their website, a white person can qualify under DEI as a small business, a veteran-owned business, a veteran-disabled business, a woman-owned business. There's all kinds of classifications that white small, because when you look at And then there's minority businesses that can qualify under small business DEI programs and small business administration. People don't know that. The people that came up with the SBA and those programs realized that small business is the largest employer in this country. That's why those were put in place in the first place. And even if that in our backyard with Nellis Air Force Base in Creech, like I said, 30% of that, of their procurements, of that $3 billion to $4 billion they spend annually, really, because a lot of people don't understand government contracting, there's probably less than 5% that goes to local Nevada small businesses and minority-owned businesses. So, I used to sit on the Minority Supplier Development Council. That was a learning experience too. One of the things that I benefited when I worked and partnered with Don, since Don was a national company, I was able to travel nationwide to see other minority programs for businesses. And, for example, we have NV Energy here. Well, the equivalent to NV Energy is Southern Cal Edison in California. Under the law, Southern Cal Edison has to spend 35% of their purchasing, their procurement dollars with disadvantaged businesses. It's the law in California. They called me when they were going to buy equipment or rent equipment. They would call me because under the law they have to hit those numbers every year. NV Energy, they went backwards. They used to have a lady named Rose Davis that was their supplier and diversity officer. They got rid of the whole program, and that was prior to the Trump administration. I kind of get upset with the people in our state legislature, especially people that look like us, because they had an opportunity when Question 3 was being passed. And what Question 3 did for NV Energy, it basically gave NV Energy a monopoly on all our power services. And NV Energy called our electorate, who were black, they needed the black vote to get that passed. Nobody in our state legislature went to NV Energy and said, we'll pass it for you, but we want a program similar to what Southern Cal Edison has. We want some supplier diversity under our law. They had an opportunity to do that, and that didn't happen. Also learned a lot about what we didn't have in terms of minority supplier diversity programs. And we really don't. At the state and local level, they're non-existent. There's organizations or companies like MGM, Kenyatta and Tony Gladney, they help run that program. That's part of the reason I did joint venture with Ahern Reynolds, because when they did City Center, they had about a 25% goal in terms of spending with minority and disadvantaged businesses. And so, people like Lorinda Gray Davis and Najma Schomburger, who worked for MGM, they did a pretty decent job on trying to get, disadvantaged businesses, and I benefited from that. Through the Clark County Black Caucus and Yvette Williams and the late Assemblyman Mr. Hogan, we did a pilot project with NDOT, and Rudy Malfabon, who was deputy director, then helped us with that. Assemblyman Hogan had done this project in Northern California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. From that pilot project we did with NDOT and with Las Vegas Paving. And when Rudy got appointed as director of NDOT, Rudy implemented supplier diversity for the airport. So today there's 8% minority participation. If there's anything that needs to be worked on here in Nevada, especially when at one point in time we were considered a blue state. If you go to other blue states, they have very active supplier diversity programs. Texas, which is a red state, I did business down there when I was with Don in Dallas-Fort Worth under their public works projects. They have a 45% spend on their public works projects when they were upgrading and renovating their airports at Dallas-Fort Worth and Love Field, 45%. Not mandated by the federal government, but by their state and local. And they put teeth on it. They told the general contractor for those projects, don't even submit your bid unless you have a plan on how you're going to reach that 45%. That's in Texas, and we don't have anything like that here in the state of Nevada. Either our elected officials don't understand, and at the end of the day, it can help even drive our economy to another level, because now I know of firms that won't come and do business in Las Vegas because they don't have those types of programs. But why it's not done, and we could probably go to, segue into my history with my father. My father ended up in Vegas because of DEI. At that, when my father left playing football and basketball for Montana State University Eastern in Montana, that was 19, when he was in Montana and he met my mom, that was probably, I want to say about 1963 or 64. And at that time, he had an opportunity to try out for the Los Angeles Lakers. And he had suffered a college injury playing football to get his master's degree for that same university. And so the NBA schedule and stuff was too hard on his knee. And at that time, they weren't paying these mega, the big money wasn't there. When he was there was Wilt and Elgin Baylor and Jerry West. And so he had his master's degree, and he heard that, this was around 67, so the civil rights era was in full effect. And so he heard that Las Vegas was actively trying to hire male black teachers. Reason being is that many of the schools were breaking out into racial riots. And so they wanted more teachers who were black and of color, especially male teachers, to come into the schools and work. And that's how he ended up out here. I think it was 67, 68, he got hired by Clark County School District as a teacher. And he also taught at UNLV. That's how him and Jerry Tarkanian became really good friends, the famous coach for UNLV, who kind of made the program what it is today. That's when him and Jerry became good friends. And he taught, for 34 years, both at the college level and high school level. And when he passed, Sig Rogich, who's very a very successful businessman and has a lot of influence in the state. When he came to his funeral, he said he helped create peace when this valley needed it. That's what Sig said about him, and he did. He brought those two communities together. Harvey Munford, former Nevada Assemblyman Harvey Munford, he was an educator here in Southern Nevada for 34 years at the college and high school level, and middle school. He taught middle school for a while too. And then he got after he retired after 35 years in education, that's when he was elected to the state assembly, which he sat in the state assembly for 12 years. And he also coached. He was, being an athlete, he coached high school athletics and this community where we sit right now. This was his district, and he was very close to this district. Everybody in this area knew who he was. And when he was in the state legislature, he was a Democrat, but before he was a Democrat, he was black, and he represented the people before any party, and that's how he worked up into the state legislature. and he worked really well because of that. He worked well on both sides of the aisles. He probably got along with more Republicans at times than he did with his own party. Just to give you an example, Mark Hutchinson, who's a Republican, he was in he's formerly lieutenant governor. Well, my dad taught Mark in high school, so Mark, Brian Sandoval, who was former governor, my dad and Brian got along. He was a Republican, and they got along really good. Governor Gibbons, Republican, got along with him, and so he worked well on both, and that was the thing too. A lot of legislators, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but some of those legislators were former students, on both sides of the aisle. So I think, and like I said, my father, he was always trying to pass legislation that focused on people, especially on the grassroots level. One of the pieces of legislation that he introduced his first year in the legislature didn't get passed until his very last term, and that was his multicultural education bill. And that multicultural education bill, it's law today, but it's still not being enforced in our schools. And what that basically is, and it's probably needed more than ever now since we have Trump in office and different things, and they're trying to erase our history and how it's being taught to our kids. Because a multicultural bill is a bill that every day or every month during the school year, a different ethnic group, a different race, their history is taught that month. So it could be Jewish month. So the Jewish community, their history and stuff would be taught. Native American, Asian, and of course African American, Black History Month, and so on and so forth. And that's what that bill is all about. And for school teachers, for them to renew their teaching license, they would have to take a course, some kind of course that was in the area of multicultural, so that the teachers, he wanted the teachers to understand the kids and where they come from, as they taught, as they were being taught. And so it is a law. It's not being enforced in our schools today, which, like I said, I think it's needed more than ever in this day and age with the climate that we're seeing, with the Trump administration and how Trump is threatening schools with their funding and stuff if they have DEI programs and stuff like this going on. So, and then, and that bill, when it passed that last year, his final year in the legislature, it got bipartisan support. The governor was Governor Sandoval, a Republican, who signed it into law. So I think Mark Hutchinson, different Republicans helped push that law through as well. Since my father, was so invested in this community, one of the things that his dream was to have the Moulin Rouge built again and running and thriving like it did back in the 60s when the Rat Pack used to go there and different people. I have a similar vision with this community, especially when it comes, I always use the example of the Asian district here in Las Vegas on Spring Mountain Road. They say that a dollar that's spent in there circulates 21 times, over 20 times. And as Black people, we don't have anything like that. Even that shopping center that I helped Agora buy, it's in the city of North Las Vegas, but they consider that East Las Vegas, Latino community. And that shopping center thrives. And Jaime Martinez, that owns La Bonita, that grocery store, does $1 million a week. Why? Because his own people are going in there, shopping there. And And so that's kind of, you know, recently our people were talking about boycotting Walmart and Target and stuff like that, which is fine, so that we can show the power of our dollar. But in my opinion, people already know the power of our dollar. We don't know the power of our dollar. A prime example is recently all the 99-cent stores closed in Las Vegas. And there used to be one right on the corner of MLK and Craig Road. And if you walk, when I drive by there, majority of people going in there whereas us, black people. Well, when that closed, I was putting it out there that we should get, you know, for example, Showman Washington, he's black and from this community. He's worked for Albertsons over 30 years. He knows the grocery store industry. I said, we need to take someone like Showman, get our bag of money together, and open up our own black-owned grocery store on that corner. Because there's a lot of blacks that live in that area. Nothing happened. If you go up there now, they have a new tenant. Guess what the tenant is? It's a small grocery store, not owned by blacks. They know the power of the company I used to work for, Agora. Why do you think they're developing all up on this side? Because they know the power of our dollar. And they're getting that bag of money from us. And it's not recirculating back to us the way it should. And that's part of the reason I got into real estate. Somebody did a documentary on all the MLK streets across the United States, and they're probably some of the poorest streets in the country. But even those poor streets, there's a lot of money, and this MLK is no different. If we go out there right now, there's tons of traffic driving up and down that street every day. Right now, land is being sold along that street. The company I work for, Agora, they're taking advantage of a federal program. Under Obama, the Republicans wouldn't pass it. Guess who got it passed? Donald Trump. Donald Trump saw it. Donald Trump's in real estate. He said, I can make money off of this program. And he did. A lot of it. Just like the company I work for that's owned by white folks. They're making money off of that program in our own neighborhoods. Cary and Agora, they have, in their Opportunity Zone Fund, they probably have close to $1 billion. That I think Cary's Jewish. He probably got it from his Jewish friends back in New York. I know he's always when I worked for him, he's always calling out in New York. I tell people, as black people, we could put all our money together into our own Opportunity Zone Fund and start developing just like Cary is. Right there, buying up all this land, buying up all the land on Jackson Street and around this area. We could set up our own Opportunity Fund and do that. That's available to us right now. We don't have tax liabilities. Guess what sits in the Opportunity Zone Fund right now? The Raider Stadium. Not only did they get $750 million from the state, they also sit in the federal, so all of the investors are getting tax advantages off of the Raider Stadium. But we are sitting over here. We could take advantage of the same program. That same program that's available for Cary Lefton and Agora Realty, and for the developers of the Raider Stadium, and now the developers of the MLB baseball stadium, because I believe that's an opportunity zone. They got $350 million from the state. That's something that we could do right now. Me, you, us, black people in general. That's why Corey and Barack put that together, is for us. And like Chris Rock said in his documentary called Black Hair, there's another business we left out in the street for somebody to grab and pick up and run and make money, $1 billion off of. We as black people, we have all kinds of opportunities amongst ourselves, but we're not like other ethnic groups. We leave that business out in the middle of the street for someone to pick up and make money, and that's what happens to us. Malcolm X the most profound statement that's still effective today. He said, it wasn't the lynching and the rapes and the beatings and all the physical atrocities that we went through as a people was terrible, but he said the worst crime that was done was what he did to our mind. That's the problem. Other ethnic groups, they don't think like us. The Asian community, they don't think like us. The Latino community, they don't think like us. They think them. They think Latino and Mexican. Asians think Korean, China. They think as a national group. We don't have ties with Africa. Africa is an emerging economy that's booming. There are more millionaires that look like us in Africa than in this country. To form that fund, we should be over there selling Las Vegas as blacks, coming back over with a bag of money, and we could buy on other parts of Vegas as well. But we don't think that way. I used to coach football and basketball like my father did at the high school level. I taught a little bit in the high schools and middle schools. And I was just telling somebody, I said, the biggest crime when we're talking about the black mind is what our kids are going through in this school system today. That's part of the reason why my father passed that bill too. Our kids don't even know who they are. You got black kids walking around saying I'm American before I'm African. Malcolm, he wasn't quiet, but he was always very respectful of people. Even his enemies, so-called enemies. If you look at some of his interviews and these white people are coming at him, I remember he kind of got excited and raised his voice, and he said, I'm sorry for raising my voice. And he was always checking himself. My dad would say to handle yourself with class. With Facebook and stuff, everything is so in your face now. It's so extreme. And in a way, I think some black people and even white people, they try to emulate what they think Malcolm was in terms of how they get up and they speak and different things. And I think we do need to get back to being better communicators, slowing down and trying to understand each other. The old saying, we got 2 ears and 1 mouth. That's the way it should operate. We should be good listeners versus being so quick to open our mouths. My mom, like I said, she's Native American. She lives in Montana. She's a county commissioner. She sent me a thing. She said, Steve, since you're a public figure now, being on the planning commission, she says, you need to watch what you post on Facebook. and she's right. If you look at different ethnic groups, it's not so much about who's leading, but it's about having that vision of everybody understanding their roles. Something I learned from my dad, and my dad being an athlete and a coach. An effective team, a good example is, I'm a Laker fan. So I remember the Lakers, it was after Kareem retired, so they put together, it was like an all-star team that they had assembled. Oh, everybody's like, oh, they gonna win a championship, and it can't be stopped. I think Kobe was even on that team. They had a really good, talent-wise, they had a team. Role players, they didn't. They didn't even win a championship. And if you look at some of the best teams in the history of the NBA, even with Michael Jordan and those old Laker teams with Kareem and all, they all knew their roles. And everybody went out and executed those roles together as a team. And I think that's what we need in our community. Black community, we have a lot of people who are talented, that have a lot. But just like our dollars, we don't bring those talents together and have everybody work those talents as a group. And, so I think today, as black people, I think we need to develop that in terms of moving forward. And we do need to hold our political leaders accountable. In my opinion, a lot of times we just vote not, and I don't think it's so prevalent just because they're black, but it's almost because there's a popularity attached to it. And we don't truly look or question them, give them the right questions on, are they going to be holding our agenda? I was just telling somebody, I said, some of these groups that have it together, like the Asian community, Latino community, even Benny Toe, who's the tribal chairman of the Las Vegas Paiutes, I was just asking him, how does these Trump cuts, to tribes, are they affecting you? He says, no, not really, Steve. In fact, we're getting ready to expand and build a hotel, because they're making money. They have, as a group, sovereignty. Even that might be the new term for us as black people. We need to have some type of sovereignty. The Asian community, they're sovereign. They're not a nation, but their attitude is as a nation, and they have economic sovereignty. And that's something that we lack, in our community. And even that's why, Benny and his tribe. But if you go to the Mawapa Paiutes, and I was just talking to one of their tribal leaders, they are affected because they don't have that economic sovereignty like Benny does with the Las Vegas Paiutes. Or if you talk to I never thought that I'd see an Indian gaming company buy a major strip hotel. The Hard Rock Seminoles bought the Mirage. I just seen a video. They have their own gated community for their people back in Florida. It has everything. It has its own police department, has its own fire department, all funded by themselves. They don't get any federal or state funding for that. That's sovereignty. She said, the only thing we don't have is a grocery store. I'm gonna have to call them up and say, hey, I'll come and set up your grocery store. I think, you go back to my father, different leaders, when you're talking about Joe Neal and Mr. Bailey and Otis Harris, the different leaders, Marzette, Lewis, there's, go back to some of the old leaders that were in this community before. And if you when I first came to the West Side, I remember the hotel right over here on the corner. I remember businesses here, even on Owens, Larry Sight and Sound. There were black-owned businesses. When my dad always said, in a way, integration and different things was an injustice to our people. Malcolm always used to say, how can you get excited about being able to go to the bathroom next to the white man? And really, because my dad said he grew up in Akron, Ohio. He said in his community, you had teachers and doctors and lawyers and professionals that lived right next door to you. The crime wasn't like it was. It was a thriving black community. And the moment that we left, this community felt the effect of it. Because I remember as a kid, it was a different community. It was more tight-knit. Right up the street on Owens at Nuclear Plaza, I think I was 8 years old, and my dad, he snuck me in. It was that night. I was just a little kid, but James Brown was performing there. So, there was, this community where it is today and where it was it's different. That whole thing that I talked about with sovereignty and as where we're at today is not where we were before. If we could have kept that together, we might be in a whole different place than we are today. And so, that's why you have, people from that era that were in like Joe Neal, you know, Joe, my dad, different people who did get in politics in that time, you know, they had a whole different philosophy and how they put pressure on. And I think today you have black politicians, their heart's in the right place. But in some cases, I don't think they really understand how to use their power. Because they do have power.